This show is part of the RetroZap.com podcast network.
Now, prepare yourselves for a Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels special edition. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Scoundrels, and welcome to episode 66.1, a Scoundrels Special Edition. I'm Dennis, and I'm joined tonight by, well, actually I'm not joined by anyone tonight. My friends and co-hosts Jay and Darth Taxis are managing some very busy schedules, so I'm flying solo. No pun intended. Actually, that was very intended. If you're new to the show, you may be curious as to what is a Scoundrel Special Edition. Good question. Our Scoundrel Special Editions are bonus episodes in which we forego many of our usual features to focus on a specific piece of content. You might think of it as kind of a Blu-ray extra to our regular episodes. Tonight I'm going to review the latest episode of Resistance, which is entitled The High Tower. Fair warning, Scoundrels, this is a full spoiler discussion, so if you haven't watched this episode, you're going forward at your own peril. So here we go. This episode begins with a shortage of fuel that results in Captain Doza electing to ration power on Colossus Station. And we then see Kaz, Tam, and Neeku working in their garage, and without power to work, they decide to head over to Aunt Z's cantina for drinks. While they're there, Aunt Z suggests that Captain Doza is part of the First Order. This kind of comes about in a conversation, and when Aunt Z is talking to Kaz and kind of being sarcastic about whether they're actually going to order anything or just get 3 waters, which, of course, is nothing on a planet that is one giant ocean. It kind of occurred to me that you've probably heard me in the past compare Colossus Station to Deep Space Nine in a way. And keeping with that theme, Aunt Z's cantina or bar or whatever you want to call it reminds me a bit of Quark's. She reminds me a little bit of Quark. And she's not the same type of entrepreneur that Quark is, who is out there running cons and trying to smuggle illicit goods, but she does run all the gambling on the station, and she is kind of a source of information and kind of fulfills that same role as Quark from Deep Space Nine, if you're familiar. So, again, some of her activities come up again later in this episode, but we'll get to that. So, Aunt Z has served some drinks, and Tam, Kaz, and Neeku are talking, and Hype Fazon shows up. So, right off the bat, we get a hint from Tam that there's a history between her and Hype that has caused her to kind of go sour on him. But Kaz sits down and begins talking to Hype Fazon, and who's the Rodian, and apparently he is the leading racer on the station. He's run all the races between the Aces this season and on the last. Later, Hype will come up upon Tam and Kaz talking. It's kind of funny because Tam is just talking about how egotistical and arrogant and selfish that Tam is, and Kaz is pulling the, he's right behind you type maneuvers, and Tam doesn't get it until Hype is right there, but he seems to ignore all that, and he invites them all to come to the High Tower, which is where Captain Doza lives, and that's where Toro Doza also has her residence, and all the Aces are maintaining their quarters. So before that they can get there, Kaz watches Major Vonreg, that is the TIE fighter pilot that dresses in the entire red armor for the First Order, and he arrives on a tanker with some fuel from the First Order. Just a bit of an aside, and there's a conversation between Kaz and Tam, and she accuses him of trying to get a leg up on her, that he is scouting out the Aces and studying them. Okay, so a couple things. One, the Aces have quite an interesting role here on the station, and in addition to racing, they do patrols, they escort in these freighters. They're kind of a multi-purpose unit, and I guess the racing is maybe something they do on the side. I'm really intrigued by the full role of the Aces. They're more than just some racers. It kind of, in the beginning, reminded me of something you would have seen in a 80s or early 90s cartoon that was aimed at younger children, in which you had racers by day and crime fighters by night. But it seems like they have a much more expansive role, and the tone with them is a little bit more serious than that. But in this case, Hype was able to hang out in Aunt Z's cantina and meet Kaz because he refuses to do anything that has to do with the First Order. And apparently he's coming to an understanding with Captain Doza about that. When the First Order is involved, he won't be around. And as he put it to Kaz, when the First Order is involved, he's hanging out in Aunt Z's cantina. So anyways, the fuel gets delivered in this tanker. The Major Vonreg and the First Order depart the tanker, and they're headed into the High Tower. Hype then escorts Tam, Kaz, and BB-8 there. And Kaz notices the First Order troopers are walking down the hall, and he starts snooping around. And another important aside, there was a bit earlier in the episode in which Neeku, who's attempting to be helpful and develop his friendship with Kaz, has developed some comlinks, and the idea is that he and Kaz can talk to each other whenever they want. And falling back on a bit from, I believe it was the Triple Dark episode, when the comlinks are too close together, you get a lot of feedback. So this has kind of become a thing in the show. Kaz takes Neeku's and had turned it off because this whole feedback had been annoying earlier and had practically deafened everyone. But when he gets outside Captain Doza's office and he knows that the First Order is in there, which is a couple stormtroopers and Major Vonreg, he turns the comlink on, he puts it on the serving droid's tray, and he brings it in there so he can kind of eavesdrop on what's going on in that office. So Kaz overhears Vonreg and Captain Fazon talking, and Vonreg proposes the First Order help out Colossus Station with pirates and other things that are going on, and Doza refuses the First Order's offer. He basically says that he can't be bought for a single shipment of fuel. And Vonreg throws it back in his face that, okay, you can't be bought. And when Doza says, I could report all this to the Republic, Vonreg says, well, I could report all your dealings with underworld types to the Republic as well, and how far would that get you? So again, that was actually some clever exposition and world building that was done by the creators of the show, in which we find out that this outer rim, edge of wild space, unknown region station, this Colossus Station, is run by Captain Doza. The First Order are regular visitors there, as we've learned earlier in this episode, and Captain Doza may not entirely be on the up and up. It's kind of a frontier. So again, kind of like Deep Space Nine, there's things going on out here on the frontier, and he's kind of doing what he has to do to get by. And there's a bit of lawlessness going on, so the Aces are kind of serving as the sheriff and the sheriff's deputies, patrolling for pirates and everything that's going on. And when the First Order proposes to move in and help out, and Doza declines. Now, I still think there's something up with Colossus Station. There's more than meets the eye. That there's something to this station that we're going to find out. Maybe not this season, and maybe not next season, but at some point in the future, we're going to find out there's some sort of a secret there that makes it so attractive to the First Order, because they are seriously interested in getting a foothold here. So it doesn't take long before the First Order leaves the mission, and they discover Kaz spying on him, mainly because the serving droid comes back out and the two comlinks are in close proximity, and they start creating all that feedback. Kaz runs down the hall, he ducks in a door, and it just happens to be Tora Doza's bedroom. And so he's still maintaining this facade that he's a mechanic on the station and he's a wannabe ace pilot, and so he's keeping his spy mission under wraps. And so Tora kind of misinterprets what he's doing there and suggests that, okay, I know what's going on. You've misinterpreted my friendliness for something that it is not, perhaps some sort of a romantic interest on Kaz. And I'll give Kaz credit. He doesn't blow his cover there. He kind of rolls with it and says, yes, that's what I'm doing here. So they're developing that spy angle for him fairly well, or better than they had been in the previous episodes. The First Order's kind of hot on his heels, and so Tora kind of shoves him out the window as a way to hide him, and now he's on a ledge outside on the station, and it doesn't take too long for the First Order to catch up to him, and Kaz begins navigating a narrow ledge while the First Order's firing on him, and then he goes from kind of carefully creeping along its side to running, and at the same time he's doing that, Neeku and Tam notice him from Aunt Z's cantina where they had returned, and Neeku points out in his kind of clueless manner that, it looks like Kaz is having a very good time. Never mind the fact that he's, fighting for his life, so to speak. So Aunt Z also notices, and she begins to chuckle. She finds this hilarious and starts taking bets on whether Kaz is going to fall off into the ocean and die. But Kaz eventually gets down to a surface, and he's still being fired on by the First Order. And with a little help from BB-8, he manages to get back into the station and escapes. But at this point, he believes that Doza is going to make a deal with the First Order, and he might actually be a First Order contact. So he's gonna, he suggests that maybe he's gonna contact Poe Dameron and report this. Doza confronts Vonreg about the First Order firing in his station and on one of their citizens, and Vonreg accuses him of having a Resistance spy. To which Torra says, "Oh, that's ridiculous. It was just a friend of mine that was, coming to visit." Now, at first, it occurred to me that Torra was covering for Kaz, but then I remembered, again, there's only really one other person on the station that knows that Kaz is a spy, and that's Jaeger, who was not in this episode, and of course BB-8, but he's a droid, and he arrived with Kaz. And so Torra was really telling the truth, that this was just a friend, that, or so she thought. So I can't help but wonder if in a future episode, Kaz's secret mission and his role as a spy is going to get revealed, and it's going to be a cause for some hurt feelings and some misunderstandings between him and everybody else. So the mission ends with Kaz back in the cantina. Then he actually returns to the garage. The place gets power, and so they begin working again. And then Captain Doza pulls up an image of Kaz that was taken while he was crawling on the ledge, and he's like, "Who are you?" So he's now suspicious of Kaz. All right, so that's kind of a summary of the episode with a little bit of commentary. A few other things that's going on. One of the things I really liked about this episode was that Kaz as a spy was improving. In the past, I've been critical because Kaz's attempt to spy were him being very active, just sneaking in broad daylight, that sneaking action down the pathway on Colossus Station, just kind of obviously eavesdropping everyone, was really a poor effort. Granted, the kid didn't get any opportunity to learn how to be a spy, but he's starting to figure it out in this episode. He's kept his ears open, and there he is in Auntie's cantina, and she mentions that there's this special shipment coming in, and it's going to Captain Doza, and she flats out accusing him of being part of the First Order. Now keep in mind, a lot of the galaxy doesn't even know about the First Order at this point, or certainly what they're capable of. So Kaz picks up on that and decides to investigate. And this is a lot better than him just actively sticking his nose everywhere, seeing if he can find the First Order. He's maintaining a better cover here. He's sticking to this role as a mechanic and a wannabe pilot, ace pilot, that is. So I appreciated that. That was a much better job. Tam also gets some good development in this episode. Her history is having arrived on Colossus Station with Hype, and then when he broke into the ranks of the Aces, she was left behind, and so this has created a lot of resentment. She basically says that Hype is not a good friend, he's an arrogant person, and he's just left everyone behind that may have been helpful with her success. And we didn't get quite all those details, but it does look like that perhaps she may have had a role in Hype's success, and now he's kind of abandoned her. Also, she sees Kaz as a bit of a rival as well. They may be both working in Jaeger's garage, but she has designs on getting the fireball repaired and racing and becoming an ace herself. So they're friends, but they also have a bit of a rivalry going on that's there. So I have to say that we didn't get a whole lot of shots of the ace pilots flying around, but the ones we did get of their ships were pretty cool. It was a very small piece of this, but watching them escort in the First Order freighter was pretty cool. Freya was the lead pilot in that, and she signaled to the ship, and it was just very methodical, and I thought that was handled really well. We also get an allusion or two back to Jaeger's past in this episode when Kaz is talking to Hype, and it's brought up that he's working in Jaeger's garage, and Hype mentions that Jaeger is a great racer, and so he's got a bit of a history there. So again, we keep getting these breadcrumbs that are leading us down the trail of Yeager's past. We know he flew with the Rebellion. We knew he was at the Battle of Jakku. At one time, he ended up at Batuu. And now we know he's also this famed racer, which we got a little bit of in the past episode, at least when the character that Elijah Wood voiced, said he wanted to sneak into the garage and see Yeager's racer. So here's the big question of this. How shady is Doza? Is he a frontier entrepreneur that's doing the best he can to keep a station running? What exactly is going on with the station? Is he someone for who a high bar of ethics is a luxury that it just simply can't afford? He's responsible for the station and everyone and all the citizens on board, so therefore he kind of does what he has to do to get by. That was kind of suggested when he confronted Major Von Reg and told him that he wouldn't stand for him shooting at the citizens of the station. So everyone keeps calling him Captain Doza, but I think this is and so maybe he is in charge of the station. It is his station, but he is taking on this role of protector of the citizens. It's a trust that's been placed in him. So that's some interesting character development that we've got going on. And just as a final note, Chora's droid, and I apologize, I don't have its name, but when Kaz is running down the hall from the First Order, the droid comes out of the room as Kaz goes into the room, and then when the First Order barges in later, the droid follows it. It's voiced by the same actress that does Freya, and that is Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. So she plays Freya. She played this voice, and you may remember her as Governor Price from Rebels, but the voice she did reminded me a lot of L337 from Solo, a Star Wars story. And good job on that. There's a nice little buckets list, is what they're calling them, the video on StarWars.com that gives you some of the Easter eggs that are in the show. There was a whole bunch of them in Doza's room. There was a stuffed Ewok. There was a little Bausch figurine. There was a bunch of other posters. There's a whole lot to see there. There's a Stormtrooper figurine as well. So, go check that out. But we kind of got away from this past few episodes, but normally we give these episodes a grade. For the High Tower, I am going to give this episode a B. It's maybe my favorite episode of the series so far. I thought the story development was a whole lot better. I enjoyed getting Tam's history with Hype and the intrigue that we had with Captain Doza and the First Order. There was still a bit of silliness with the antics with Kaz on that ledge, but overall the wackiness and zaniness that we've seen over the previous episodes was toned down quite a bit. And if you listen to our last review of a Resistance episode that I did with Joe Tabano, which would have been episode 65.5, he had made the point that Star Wars has always been for children. You don't have to go to these exaggerated efforts to appeal to them, and I think this episode kind of proves that and proves Joe's point. But there you have it. That's overall worthy of a B. That's going to do it for my review of the High Tower. Thank you all so much for indulging me on this, and I hope to have Taxus and Jay, or at least one of them, back for the next time we do a review of the show. And if you have not caught episode 66, which we're calling Execute episode 66, insert your best Palpatine impression there. I hope you'll go back and check that out. That's our Halloween Spectacular. We put a lot of work into that one. We did a lot of recruiting to get some voices on that one, and we got a lot of antics and shenanigans, plus a great discussion of Joe Schreiber's Maul Lockdown book, which I highly recommend. If you want to find more of Darth Taxus, you can find him on The Geek Supreme each week with Scott Murray, Jeff McGee, and Regina Davis with their Around the Horn style geek topic discussion show. You can find Jay's blogs and fashion reviews on Coffee with Kenobi. And as for me, you can find my comic reviews on retrozap.com. And each month, I'm talking Star Wars comics with Jovial J. Shepard on Jedi Journals. And for November, we're going to be recovering the Volume 3 of the Darth Vader comic, which is The Burning Seas. It's basically how the Empire conquered Mon Calamari. I highly recommend it. Great book, but make sure you tune in for that discussion. If you want to find us on social media, we are SQPod on Twitter and Instagram, and on Facebook at facebook.com/SQPod. You can email us at sqpod@retrozap.com. You can follow Darth Taxus on Twitter at Darth Taxus. Jay is at Joyce Krebs, and I am at DJKVER2. Speaking of RetroZap, we are a proud part of the RetroZap.com podcast network. The network currently features more than a dozen shows covering everything from retro gaming and movies to the Animaniacs, Collecting, Dune, Game of Thrones, and of course, a ton of Star Wars. Subscribe to the network feed to get them all. That's going to do it for the Scoundrels Special Edition. We'll talk to you all soon with another edition of Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels. Until then, may the Force be with you.